Welcome and thank you for joining us today on the Heroes and Icons podcast. I'm your host, Greg Randolph. Please find me on the X at Greg Heroes Icons, and please visit my new website, heroesandiconspodcast.com, to get updates for great shows like this and others. I'm also a featured podcaster on HoustonCityBeat.com. That's a cool website for happenings and local businesses in the Houston area. Please check them out as well. And if you're enjoying the show, please help me grow the podcast by sharing any of these inspiring episodes with a friend. Thank you for doing that. We have a very special guest today. If you are a sports and business fan, especially positive leadership training, this young lady needs no introduction. She is a keynote speaker and workshop facilitator for the Jon Gordon Companies, where her topics of expertise include, but are not limited to, the power of positive leadership, the power of positive team, the power of positive leadership for teens, and the energy bus. Jade has worked with companies such as Haynes, Reddy Ice, and Paysafe, many athletic programs, including Harvard, Ole Miss, and Auburn, professional teams in the NHL, and nonprofits about leadership and team first mindset. Jade Gordon is a graduate of Clemson University with a degree in communications. After college, she moved to Los Angeles to pursue acting while working at Nobu Malibu, a world famous restaurant, where she learned the art of great customer service by loving and caring about the people she encountered daily. She brings that same love and passion to her keynotes and workshops. She is both a keynote speaker and a Power of Positive Leadership certified trainer for the Jon Gordon Companies, and she happens to be the daughter of critically acclaimed best-selling author, one and the same Jon Gordon. Jade Gordon is my guest today on the Heroes and Icons podcast. How are you doing, Jade? Thank you so much for being my guest today.
I'm doing great. Happy to be here. Excited for this conversation.
Well, likewise. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. So you keep a really busy schedule. What are you working on presently?
So typically I'm traveling around the country working with sports teams, companies, schools, teens as well, doing keynotes, workshops. So just really talking about the power of positive leadership, the power of positive team. And so that kind of keeps me busy traveling around the country and doing my best to impact as many people as possible.
Excellent. I want to ask you specifically about the power of positive leadership for teens. I mean, that has to be pretty encouraging to make a difference with the kids, right? How does that specific program work for you guys?
So my dad has the book, The Power of Positive Leadership, and we kind of took that and created a training program or a workshop. And
Okay.
so we were doing this with companies and adults, and we realized, a lot of teens are struggling, especially, I remember myself in middle school and high school
Sure.
really struggling and needing positivity, needing these leadership principles that I can apply to my own life. And so we took that workshop and kind of formatted it a little bit to be the verbiage and the lingo to be more suited towards teens. But it's the same principles, same concepts. And so basically it teaches teens kind of how to have a vision of what you want to create, how to overcome negativity, how to have optimism, positivity, and belief, how to deal with negativity, have great relationships, and move forward through adversity and challenges with a positive mindset. So we kind of taken that workshop. And so when people bring me in, I work with them and we do activities. They have workbooks, getting them to write down, some negative thoughts that come into their head, because we all deal with negative thoughts, but
Right.
taking those negative thoughts and speaking positive truth to those of I am good enough. I am here for a reason. I am worth all the things that I worked for. And so really getting them to not sit in the negativity that a lot of people and teens struggle with, but to move forward through that with the tools to overcome the challenges and the adversity. So that's kind of how it works and what we're doing with teens to help impact them in that way.
Excellent. I love that you guys are making a difference with the kids because those can be some pretty tough ages.
Yeah.
12, 13, 14, and you've got your peers and everything else. Speaking of that, let me go back just a little bit to your lacrosse playing days. Your dad was your coach for a while. And so my question is, how inspiring and maddening was it to have him as both a coach and your dad at the same time?
So
It's
he wasn't my high school coach. He
okay,
always coached me no matter what,
right.
even in middle school and things like that. But it definitely it was an interesting dynamic, especially now even working together as him being my boss. And so knowing
Right.
how that kind of worked out when I was younger,
Hmm.
helped today for us to work together. But it definitely was both beneficial and also very maddening, like you said. So it was one of those things where having the dynamic of him being my dad, but also coaching me and pushing me and holding me accountable and holding me to a standard. It definitely, there was many times where I did want to quit playing lacrosse for sure.
Right. It's important to have your parents involved in those activities, and we don't appreciate it at the time maybe, but yeah, as I've gotten older, for sure, I appreciate how much my parents did in that regard to get myself and my brothers to all of our baseball and soccer and everything else that we had going on. So I definitely appreciate it now,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
at least more than I did back then. But how did those experiences and working with your dad, how did those kind of help shape your career and what you're doing today?
So growing up, with my dad doing what he does, I always said, I will never speak. I will never do what you do. You're so annoying. Cause sometimes like you just don't want to hear all the positivity, right? And
Sure.
so I always said I would never do this. But now that I feel like it's what I've been called to do, before I started speaking and I decided I wanted to, but before I had even done any keynotes, we kind of sat down and said, okay, how is this going to work? Because I said, you drive me nuts. I love my dad. He's my favorite person on the planet.
Sure.
But sometimes he's so organized and so diligent that I
Hmm.
didn't get that from him. So that's what all our fights usually consist of him being like, why can't you just be like me? But we had a conversation that he had learned from his friend of putting on different hats.
Okay.
So he'll call me and say, hey, I have my dad hat on. This is your dad. How are you doing? Or he'll say, hey, this is your boss. And so we kind of it's really been beneficial because we've navigated conversations of, is this my boss or is this my dad? And so it's like, hey, this is your boss. If you don't do this, I'm going to fire you. And then there's the ones where it's like, hey, this is your dad. How can I help you? So it's funny, but it's actually really prepared me for, this what I'm doing and how we have the dynamic that we do. Because when we first started kind of working together, we were like, how is this going to go? This is either going to go amazing or it's going to be awful. And my dad's like, you're either going to quit or I'm going to have to fire you. But it has been so amazing just using that of the different hats of understanding what mode we're each in of like, hey, this is, or I'll call him like, hey, can I talk to my boss? I have something really important to ask. And then he's like, yep, this is your boss. So it's really, really helped the work that I do because my dad obviously does the same exact thing as me. And so it's allowed us to have an even better relationship and understand each other on an even deeper level because I understand what he goes through and he knows where I've been with traveling around and speaking and all of that kind of stuff. So it's just honestly been great, truly.
That was one of my main questions here that I had for you. It's just common for family businesses, but what is it like to not only work for your dad's company, but what is it like to work directly with your dad? And how has that strengthened your relationship with him?
Yeah, it's cool because sometimes I'll go speak at events, and before I go, obviously each group I speak to is different, and I'll tell different stories and maybe do different principles in different ways. And so it's really been cool to call him and say, "Hey, I'm about to speak to this company. Do you think this story would be great to tell? Or do you think they would resonate with this?" Or he'll call me and say, hey, I'm about to speak to this team. Should I tell this story or this story? And so it's really allowed us to bond even more. I mean, we're super close because growing up, I played lacrosse. And so he came with me to most of my tournaments and, was always coaching me and all these different things. But it's allowed us to, as adults, really bond on a deeper level because we
Sure.
both do the same thing and we both understand what the dynamic is with each audience. And so it really has been so cool, honestly, as an
Mhm.
adult, remembering little me being like, I never want to do this. I never want to work with you, to now doing it and feeling like this is the best thing ever. Like I get to work with my dad. He's still my dad. We don't fight as much, which is great. We thought we were going to, but it's just been so cool, so beneficial. And not only is it cool for us, but we get to impact so many people. And a lot of people will say, I struggled with a lot of imposter syndrome when I first started doing it, but people
Right.
will say, Jade, sometimes when you go speak to teens, it's better that you're 25. They don't want to hear from a 50-year-old man, right? Because while my dad's keynotes are great, my dad's amazing, it's each group resonates with somebody differently, right? And so it's been cool to see the difference in, okay, what would you do here, Dad? Okay, if he's speaking to a younger audience, hey, do you think this story would resonate with them more? And so it's just been truly amazing to get to work together and just find different ways to impact people on another level.
That's a really great point because you're a lot closer in age. You're probably closer to the teachers' ages than your dad would be.
Exactly.
Is that pretty
Yeah,
close?
I've seen
Yeah,
that a lot. Yeah, of people being like, you know what? We've just graduated college and now we're teaching and we are struggling. And how do I, face these challenges and adversity? And so giving them the tools to do that because they're also impacting the next generation, right? So it's kind of
sure.
like a cycle of helping each other out. But that is what I hear a lot of like, hey, we want a 25-year-old who's closer to their age, who understands more so like, yeah, maybe your dad experienced it, but it was a long time ago. And so it's been kind of cool to see people wanting the younger people to come in and have an impact on the next generation.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. I can absolutely see how that would be a big dynamic in the ranges of ages is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, definitely.
So when did you, Jade, when did you first know that you wanted to maybe follow in your dad's footsteps?
It wasn't until after COVID. So COVID happened. I was living in LA, working at a place called Nobu,
Right.
and I really was miserable. I was there for a year and a half, and a woman basically came up to me and told me that she saw me going all around the country, speaking and impacting people. And she didn't know who my dad was, didn't know what he did. And so when she said that, I was like, wow, like maybe, I don't want to be here at Nobu anymore. I didn't know what I wanted to do after I graduated college. I have a degree in communications. What should I do? And so when she said that, I was like, okay, maybe I'm supposed to start speaking. So I called my dad and I said, I want to start speaking. And he was like, you're doing this because you want to, right? Not because you think I want you to. And I was like, no, I think I'm supposed to do this. And so my dad, being my dad, he said, all right, you either sink or swim, like figure it out. And so I was like, okay. And so I went through his training program, learned how to kind of be a speaker and facilitate workshops. And then obviously growing up with him, I know this stuff kind of like the back of my hand, but being able to kind of help people or translate it to them is a whole other thing in itself. And so when that woman said that to me, that was kind of the moment that I had this thought of like, oh, I could start speaking. But of course, having the imposter syndrome of, are people going to compare me to my dad? What if people say, oh, Jon Gordon's daughter is awful or she's not as good as him? And so that kind of held me back a little bit. But it was like when I realized, okay, I think I'm supposed to do this. And it was a moment of, it's not just about me or just for me. It's about how can I take the message that my dad is sharing with people because he can't be at all places at once. So
Sure.
how can I also have an impact of sharing this message? And so that was kind of the aha moment of where I realized, okay, I'm supposed to join my dad's company and start sharing this message to impact as many people as possible.
I was going to say, I think almost everyone who's ever tried to do something and there's that uncertainty. So I think almost everybody has that, hey, am I supposed to be here? Am I this, am I that, or whatever. So I think everyone has that imposter syndrome, but everybody's got a place. Everybody, if they want it, there's a place for them. You're
Yeah.
certainly doing that. Um, in the movie Jerry Maguire, in one of the offices, and if I'm recalling this correctly, there's a sign that reads, "A positive something is better than a negative anything." How proud are you of your dad in his transformation to being such a positive influence and making such a huge impact?
So funny you talk about that movie. That's one of I love any Tom Cruise movie. And so we grew up saying, show me the money, Jerry. And so I love that so much. But I would say if my dad didn't change, I
Mhm.
wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. And so not only did it impact him, but it impacted his family and impacted so many people. And so when my mom tells me stories of how he used to be before he,
Mhm.
became super positive and started doing this, I just don't believe it because I'm like there's no way my dad was like that because I've seen him be positive from the beginning, but realizing he's not naturally positive. So it's
Right.
seeing him work at it every single day
Right.
and seeing how he applies this stuff to his life. Because it also would be different if he was sharing these principles and all these things, but behind closed doors, he wasn't living it out. He was being, hypocritical, but he truly embodies the things that he teaches to people and the things he talks about. And so it's been such a great example for me now that I'm doing this work to say, hey, I need to do these practices if I'm teaching people them because they're life changing. It's a mindset practice, right? And so getting that to be a habit not only impacts you, we say being positive doesn't just make you better, it makes everyone around you better. And so I would say seeing my dad be this positive person has been so, so cool because so many people come up to him and say, hey, you changed my life. And
Yep.
he wouldn't have been able to do that if he didn't first change his life. And so it's a testament to what the work that we're doing, how it can have an effect on every single person we encounter. And so I think it's just super, super cool.
Very much so. It kind of sounds like maybe he grew up with not being around positive influences. So if that's the case, I mean, I had kind of a similar thing, and so it takes a lot of work, and it's a big mountain to climb. And so he's definitely made such a huge impact. And I finally read The One Truth, and it's just, I mean, just a phenomenal book. It
Yeah.
really is.
It even changed my life too. So it's like one of those things where growing up, you don't want to admit your parents' right. But as an adult, it
Always,
still kind of pains
still.
me sometimes to say that,
Yep.
right? But I'm
Yep.
like, I read The One Truth and I'm like, wow, this is next level stuff. Like this, it impacted me, the way I
Right.
think about things. I was with a friend the other day and they were like, oh, if I do this, and I was like, that's separation. And so we joke about it, because it's become like kind of our lingo of like have an abundance mindset, like, oh, that's separation. And so it's been, but it's changing people. And so it's just so cool that he does this and that I get to even be a part of it. So I'm super grateful for that.
Well, you're both very fortunate to have each other, and I love your program and what you guys are doing. Let me ask you about this. So the first time that you spoke in front of a team, it was Clemson baseball. What were your emotions like before you spoke to them? How did they receive you? And then how did your speech make an impact on their team that year?
So I'm just thinking about how I felt in that moment. I mean, I was so nervous and scared and still that was like the peak of the imposter syndrome. And so I remember being there and I had just gone to kind of support my dad because obviously I went to Clemson and I always love going back. But 5 minutes before he was about to speak to them is when he said to me, "You're going to speak to the team." And I was like, "What? No. Oh my gosh. Like I didn't even have time to prepare anything." And he was like, "Nope, you're doing it. You have to have courageous confidence. Go out there, and I want you to share a principle, tell them a story, and that's all you have to do." And I was like, freaking out because I'm thinking to myself, these are guys my age, they're my peers. They're not going to want to listen to a girl. These are baseball players. And so I was just like, had so many different emotions, but I literally just went out there and did it. Couldn't even tell you what I said in the moment. After I finished, I was like, what did I just say? Because it's one of those things where sometimes when you get on stage, you just black out. And so I shared a principle with them of talking to yourself versus listening to yourself.
Right.
And I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure they had an amazing season that year, the rest of the year. Not that it had anything to do with me or my dad, right? But it's giving
You never
those
know.
tools of talking to yourself versus
Sure.
listening to yourself
Yeah.
to get through the challenges that they were going to face in the season. But they're baseball players, so they're hard to read, right?
Right.
But apparently, they had a great season. They really were hungry for that information. But it was one of those things where I was freaking out, I was nervous, but I just went out and did it, and that kind of set the tone for now the rest of the over 2 years that I've been speaking of. Even if I feel like I'm nervous, it's not about me. It's about all the people that I'm going to impact and how I can help change their lives with one story, one principle, or whatever they need in that moment.
Well, I mean, baseball is certainly a game of confidence, and any sport is. So I'm sure that helped them quite a bit to raise their awareness, to have a mindset of instead of saying you're a whatever someone wants to call themselves in those moments, they miss a sign from the third base coach or they don't tag up at third or whatever it is. there's a better way to talk to yourself and to just not put yourself down in that sense. That's the separation, right? So,
Definitely. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So I'm hoping that it impacted them and that they're talking to themselves versus listening to themselves. Because you don't want to listen to the negativity, the doubt. You want to talk to yourself with those words of encouragement to help them to be more positive, right? It's huge in everyone's life, right?
absolutely. How much do you think that yelling or negative talk or criticism affects a player? And then what's the line then between encouraging a player or a teammate and maybe offering them a correction or encouragement and raising their awareness of whatever the situation is?
So a lot of the workshops we talk about is love and accountability.
Hmm.
And it's like having relationships, I think, are the foundation of everything. And so having relationships on a team to where if somebody's dealing with negativity or struggling with something, having somebody on the team to offer those words of encouragement, just but to say, hey, how do we take this challenge, this adversity, this negative thing that you're facing and turn it into a positive? So having that
Right.
mindset shift, that different perspective to help allow them to not sit in the negativity, to not allow the negativity to sabotage them or the team as a whole. But how do I find the balance of love and accountability, of
Right.
showing you encouragement that I love you while also still holding you accountable, of saying, hey, let's move through this in a positive way because I'm not going to let you sit in this negativity, or I'm going to
Sure.
hold you to a standard that's been set on this team.
Hmm.
And so really we think that's crucial in relationships, because if I don't have that relationship with you, or I'm not pouring into you, or you don't feel like I care or showing you that I'm committed to you with support, if I offer you constructive criticism or advice, you're going to be more likely to be receptive to it if we have established a great relationship, if you know that I care about you. But if
Right.
I'm giving you criticism, if you're being negative and I'm just on you, I'm giving you a hard time, you're probably going to say, hey, get off my back. And that could lead to burnout. So we want
Right.
to find this balance of when somebody's struggling with negativity or whatever's going on, how do we support them to not allow them to bring us down, but to bring them up to that higher state of mind, right? And help them
Yep.
move through that in a positive way. And we see that that's been crucial for having a connected, united team of those little individual relationships between people, because that creates one connected, united team moving through the challenges, moving through the adversity and the negativity.
Absolutely. And I was just going to say, it's probably going to be received a lot better if it's in a one-on-one situation. You pull somebody aside, you don't call them out in front of the team or the group. Or the other positive, though, is that when something like that does happen in a team setting, it's not to make an example of somebody, but that player, that person is probably going to be faced with that situation again. And so
Yes.
that's going to give them that experience to know, oh, hey, this is what happened last time. Let's be sure we're doing a XYZ, whatever the game situation might be.
Definitely. I totally agree. Helping them because, again, life is not easy, right? We have to be positive because life is hard, and we're going to continue to face those challenges and adversity. And if we really allow it to be a mindset practice where when you have those challenges, you're trying to find the positive, hopefully as a result, every time you face a challenge like that, it may not be the same challenge over and over, but it's going to
Right.
be probably something similar, like
Right.
you're saying, that's going to help you with the rest of your life, right?
Right.
Because you're going to continue to face those things. So having the tools to move through it is crucial.
And that's going to give somebody the confidence for the next time they face that, and then they're going to execute it properly, and then they're going to gain more confidence.
Exactly. Yep. So good.
Excellent. Well, this has been just an elevating and empowering conversation already. But let me ask you just a couple more things here, if I can, and then we'll move on to the rest of our evening. What is the stage like? How do you approach it? And then what are some things that you do to connect to your audience?
Every stage is different, right? Depending on the audience, where I am, what kind
Mm.
of, if it's in an auditorium, what it looks like. But for me, when I first started, I was so nervous. And I remember my dad saying to me, like, just allow the Holy Spirit to move through you. Like, it is not about how well you do. If you forget something, it does not matter. everything you're saying, the whole goal is how you can help impact somebody else. And so that helps me to, in the beginning, I was always super nervous to get on stage, but now it's kind of an excitement thing of, okay, how can I impact these people? Like, what do they need to hear so that I can help them maybe be more positive or move through their challenges and their adversity? I do sometimes still get nervous because it's like, oh my gosh, how are they going to receive it? What if I mess up? But that's those negative thoughts, right? And so speaking the positive truths is I've done this for so many times that even if I mess up, who cares? As long as they get the core of what I'm saying, that's all
Right.
that matters. And
And
so, yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, people, like, if you do make a mistake or you have a hiccup on something, 99% of the people aren't going to even pay attention to it or acknowledge that. But
Because
it's
it's not
not,
like they don't know my full talk, so they don't know if it's, if I miss something, they're not going to know that.
and then to your point though, with the Holy Spirit though, I see so many things and personal development. I forget where I need to give credit here, but the speaker said basically, it's not the light that's shining on me, it's the light that's shining through me. And
Yes.
that's the big difference there, I think,
Yes.
is
I always pray, I'm like, Holy Spirit, use me as a vessel to impact these people. It's not my message. It's not my dad's message. It's your message. And so
right.
that's kind of what helps me. But when I connect to the audience, I think that also kind of plays into it of it's not about me. So how do I connect with the audience so that they really understand? And so I feel like when I tell certain stories, that helps them to kind of connect in a way, or maybe when you tell a story of about a principle I'm sharing with them, they kind of get to connect with it, and maybe it's something that can relate to their own life. So that's kind of how I make the connection with them. But I do also like to make eye contact with people, talk to them before I get on stage, and even after having those conversations. I think, again, relationships are crucial, and so how can I connect with the audience so that they can get the most out of what I'm saying?
Definitely. And you guys do a great job of that. So what do you try to, I guess that it's time and place and it depends on company or team or organization, this or that. But what are some things that maybe you try to get them to focus on? If you were in the audience, what would you want to be inspired by?
So I mainly talk about the power of positive leadership and go through the principles from that book or the training, the workshop that we've created. And
Mhm.
so it's basically a lot of it is having a vision of what you want to create and what are the little things that you can do every single day to achieve that goal. And we talk about kind of the analogy of the telescope and the microscope. And your telescope is your big picture vision of what you want to achieve and the direction in which you want to go. It kind of serves as your North Star. And your microscope is your zoomed focus actions that you're going to take each day to achieve that goal. And so getting them to think about things, and I always tell people it can be super broad, it can be for the next year, or a vision even for the week. It can start on Monday and end the next Monday of what you want to achieve. And so that allows them to think, okay, what do I want to achieve? And what are those actionable items that I can do each day to achieve that goal so that I'm being my best? Then once we've kind of established that, we talk about dealing with negativity, right? A lot of times people will encounter negativity and will try and brush it off, and then it festers and gets even worse. So we're teaching them how to deal with negativity. We're really talking about that optimism, positivity, and belief. We want that mindset practice of finding the negative and looking through the negative to have the positive outcome. So we're teaching them all these different things, or I'm teaching them on stage, whether it be a workshop or a keynote,
Mhm.
to do all these different things so that they can lead themselves and also lead other people, because that's the power of leadership, right? And we tell
Right.
people you don't have to have a title to be a leader. You don't have to be the boss. You don't have to be the CEO. You don't have to be a captain on your team. Every single person contributes to the team culture, and every single person is a leader because you're always leading yourself, either in a positive way or a negative way. Hopefully, it's positive,
Yep.
or the people around you. And so, those are all the principles that I like to share with people to help them, fuel them, equip them to be a positive leader, because we say hopefully you can impact yourself, your team, your organization, and one person at a time we can make the world a more positive place. So that's kind of the things that I share, and the things I want them to get out of it to help them be a more positive person.
You guys are doing such a phenomenal job. What's next for Jade Gordon? And where can the listeners go to get some more information about you and the amazing expertise that you and the Jon Gordon Companies offer?
So I'm at Instagram, Jade Gordon 11, on X, Twitter, Jade_Gordon 11. You can email me at jade@jongordon.com. And what's next is I got a busy next couple months of really just traveling around, speaking, impacting people, company, teams, teens, just anybody who wants it. I'm getting a lot of outreach of saying, hey, we need this, especially now moving out of the pandemic. We need this positivity. We need this culture change. And so I'm super excited. Anytime I get to go speak and impact people, it's so exciting because people are hungry for this. And so that's what I'll be up to the next couple weeks and months, and just doing my best to bring the power of positive leadership to everybody and anybody who wants it.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Jade, so much for speaking with me today. It's really been great to meet you, and I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. Me too. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jade. All right, everyone. Thank you again for listening to the Heroes and Icons podcast with your host, Greg Randolph. Once more, thank you very much to our guest, Jade Gordon, and a huge shout out to your amazing team at jongordon.com as well. You can find the link to Jade's website in the show notes for this podcast. Thank you again, everyone, for listening. Have a great night. God bless. All right, let me just